recorded as well. We're also in the process of streaming this on our Facebook page, so stand by for that as well. And just give us another, I would say, 2 minutes to get started. But in the meantime, if you want to say hello in the chat, we really appreciate y'all doing that. I see some folks from Stanford, Kissimmee, of course, Orlando. It's always great to see the diversity of Floridians that are joining us tonight and join us for a lot of our legislative reviews. So we really, really appreciate y'all. You are absolutely fantastic. And I want to make sure to, oh, down the street from Concord. That's great, James. Good to see you. We love our neighbors tuning in. That's fantastic. More folks, Coe, we got Belle Isle in the house. Oh, I love to see this type of engagement. Y'all are fantastic. We'll get started about another 2 minutes. And so just give us a 60 seconds or so, and we'll make sure everyone's settled and there are no Zoom issues so far. So appreciate y'all joining in. I'm just gonna send one quick message as well to any stranglers out there. What a great crowd. Y'all are awesome. Let me see. Just send one last reminder to folks. Perfect. Awesome. Okay, y'all. Palm Beach, Flagler. I love this. Oh, it's a great question from Ray. Since legislative session goes longer, do you get extra pay? We do not. But I do appreciate that thoughtful question. We do get reimbursed for travel, and we can request like a per diem per day that we're in Tallahassee. Um, but that's also determined by leadership. And sometimes your staff is not authorized to travel with you either. So it definitely just depends. Hi, Deanna. Oh, it's so good to hear from you, Deanna. It's been a long time. So yes, it really just depends on leadership, but your salary stays the same, but you do get that reimbursement to travel to and from Tallahassee. So there is at least that benefit. All right, y'all, let's go ahead and get started. I'm hoping folks can see my screen. Um, as a reminder, this is Legislative Anavi Eskamani, proudly serving District 42 in the Florida State House Legislature. And as you might tell, I have a bit of a cold right now. And so unfortunately started getting sick over the weekend and was very crummy last night and still a little crummy today. So I've been staying inside not to get other people sick and moved a lot of my calls to virtual and just trying to play catch up today as I'm moving a little bit slower than usual. And I'm hoping tomorrow I'll be at 100% as I have another packed day tomorrow. So with that said, I appreciate y'all giving me some grace as my voice is a little softer today, and I definitely have cough drops with me in case I need them and my water nearby. So thanks so much for being a part of this, and I hope you'll find the presentation today informative, but also, of course, action oriented at the same time. As a reminder, we do have closed captions available, and so you can activate those both on Facebook and on the Zoom channel. Thank you for the health advice. I appreciate y'all. I definitely need to take more vitamin C as well. But just I'm going to ask our team if they could also drop these directions in the chat as well, because I know folks who are visually impaired or hard of hearing may also benefit from having directions typed out. And so with that said, this visual does show you where you could turn on those closed captions, both on Facebook and on our Zoom channel as well. Thank you, Beverly. I appreciate it. I want to always give a big thank you to our team. We are nothing without our team of not just staff, but also incredible interns and volunteers as well. A lot of unmentioned names on this slide that do a lot of amazing work with us and support us in so many ways, from constituent services to policy work to community outreach and events, even just navigating the visitors in Tallahassee, which can get pretty busy if you've ever done it before. So do appreciate folks tuning in, and for all the amazing team members that helped to make this event a success as well. So shout out to Jasmine, Madison, and Victoria. So as a reminder, this is District 42 where we proudly serve. It includes municipalities of Orlando, Belle Isle, Winter Park, Edgewood, Maitland, and the historic town of Eatonville. I always want to encourage folks to make sure you know who your state representative and state senator is as well. This is a map of our district, but there's 120 districts in totality on the House side and 40 on the Senate side. And so if you want to scan that QR code, and our team can also drop in the chat. Hi, Tom. Great to see you. Thank you for your service. Our team can also drop in the chat how to find your representative. But always, one of the questions I always get from folks is, how can I be a better advocate? How can I get involved? Or how can I advocate for the issues that I care about? And the first step really is knowing who your representative is and reaching out to them and establishing that relationship. And so want to make sure you have that information here. And so definitely feel free to scan the QR code or also check out flhouse.gov, click on that representatives tab, and then you'll be able to find your representative by just dropping your address there. All right, so let's keep moving forward and dive right into the 2025 legislative session, which is still in motion right now. So typically, legislative session is 60 days long. As a reminder, before session actually starts, we have what are called committee weeks, which is our series of almost like a pregame to session. They are committee meetings. We are beginning to hear bills. Oftentimes, we're also hearing workshops and presentations from different state agencies. But it basically builds up towards that 60-day start. And for those 60 days straight is when we're actually not only hosting committee meetings, we're also on the House floor. So that's why it's referred to session. Session more literally just means we're in session on the House floor, voting on bills that have been vetted through the entire legislative committee process and are now being heard by all of us together. And so this year, session started on March 4th and was supposed to end on May 2nd. But as y'all know, because there is no state budget, session has been extended. Now, I'll be talking about that more in a second. We are a part-time legislature, as a reminder. And so, unlike Congress, we're only in Tallahassee for about a third of the year, depending on all these extended sessions and special sessions. But of course, our salary is that of a part-time employee. So our salary is only $28,000. With that said, we do get reimbursed for travel to Tallahassee. We do get state healthcare benefits. We also get a per diem. So, not here to cry pity or anything, but I think it's important to remember that many lawmakers do have other full-time jobs, myself included. So we do manage a full-time job myself that I work separately, in addition to being a legislator and providing these types of updates. And of course, working on the budget, working on constituent services, and so forth. And so, with that said, being in Tallahassee is a huge, huge important part of this role to make sure that you're a part of the process of a 116 some billion-dollar state budget. And that is our one constitutional duty. It is to pass a balanced budget, which again, we haven't finished at this time because the Florida House and Florida Senate are having a debate as it pertains to what size the budget should be. The debate really started out with the Florida tax package, which basically dictates not just the tax breaks that we will create for consumers and other taxpayers, but a tax package that impacts the amount of revenue that comes into the state, i.e., the revenue that can be back allocated to taxpayers in the form of teacher pay, in the form of infrastructure projects, in the form of public safety, and so forth. So that's the crux of the debate we're in right now. And that's why there's still at this point no budget agreement between the House or the Senate. And yes, Ray, it's a great question. We also can't participate in FRS. So that's a really great point as well. Okay, so what is an extended session? I already kind of spoke to this, but I want to emphasize the timeline. So we actually don't know when we're going back to Tallahassee. We also don't know when the extended session will end. What we do know is that the deadline to pass a budget really is June 30th because Florida's fiscal year starts July 1st. At this point, the Florida House has extended session till June 30th, but the Florida Senate has only extended session till June 6th. So June 6th at this time is our deadline. And Of course, that can change if the House and Senate both agree to extend session. I should add that during this time, because we're still in legislative session, we are not allowed to fundraise. That is one of the prohibitions when we're in session. And so there is a special election happening right now in Senate District 15 and House District 40. And any candidates who are in that race who are also still elected officials in the legislature can't fundraise. So it definitely highlights some of the complexities that can come to be when you have this extended session and election timelines interfere with session timelines. And excuse me, I am still recovering from a cold, so thank you for your grace as I take some water real quick. Okay, so everyone has seen Schoolhouse Rock and how a bill becomes a law, so I won't spend too much time on this, but just as a reminder, when a bill is when an idea comes to a lawmaker, it gets filed into a bill. We do have a House drafting office that helps us draft legislation, and then that bill will get a bill number. It gets assigned to specific committees by speaker, the speaker's office, and the Senate president's office. So basically the fourth floor, as we call it, is where the speaker's office and the Senate president's office are located. They really dictate the direction of your legislation, what committees it goes to and how many committees it has. And so your goal as a lawmaker is to shepherd that bill through its committee stops to the House floor. And I'm really excited while I'm here to let y'all know that one of our bills did pass off the House floor, and that is our right to repair for power wheelchairs. It's legislation we're very proud to work alongside Disability Rights Florida and the Elder Law Clinic at FSU, which will serve our Floridians who are wheelchair users and being able to access repairs in a much more affordable and efficient way. Unfortunately, the Florida Senate dragged its feet on this bill. It got through one committee stop, but not the second. So we will be filing it again next year with an expansion to also include non-motorized wheelchairs, especially to support our adults with disabilities. So really looking forward to refiling that bill alongside our elopement prevention bill, which also got through its first committee stop, but got stalled on its second committee stop. So we did see some great traction in some of our bills this year, and we're definitely excited to go at it again next year. Okay, so as a reminder, I've done screen shares before, and if we have time, I'll do another screen share of just how to track bills and how to visit committees and see who serves on committees. But I don't have that on our agenda for tonight, just in case we run out of time. But as a reminder, if you go to flhouse.gov or flsenate.gov, you can actually see the full list of committees, and these committees do evolve to some degree every 2 years because leadership also gets to create their committees. So for example, a new committee was just created called the Select Committee on Property Taxes, which I serve on. So new committees can also be come to fruition during session, after session. But with that said, you can notice in this one example, this one slide, that there's always one big committee, and then there's potentially silos underneath that big committee. The only committee where there isn't silos is Ways and Means. That is the tax committee, which I am the ranking member of. So we don't have any subcommittees under Ways and Means in most cases. It's just this freestanding Ways and Means. But with that said, almost every other silo is going to have these subcommittees that fall under them, as you can see with the Budget Committee. And then, of course, this Commerce Committee as just two examples to reference. All right. So real quick, because the state budget is such a big issue of contention right now, I did want to remind y'all of where Florida get their where the dollars go, right? How much money comes in, and where how is it actually allocated currently, to give you some perspective on how large Florida's budget is, but also what are its sources, and then what are the most expensive silos. So this is only a snapshot of the state budget. Trust me, things get a lot more into the weeds when you go deeper into it, but it does provide you with a basic summary of where our tax revenue comes from and how it's spent. And so by the numbers, this is a really great breakdown from the current fiscal year. So this is not for 2025 to 2026. This is 2023 to 2024. But of course, the budget numbers will somewhat stay the same by ratio. So as you can see, a $37.9 billion of Florida state budget comes from the federal government. So we are very reliant on federal dollars to help support our budget. These federal dollars typically come in the shape as reimbursements for Medicaid, transportation projects. A lot of these dollars are not flexible. They're more restrictive to a specific need. And so you can tell, though, that Florida is very reliant on federal dollars, and we couldn't balance our budget without that federal support. The other silo right on top of it, at 30.2 billion, are state trust funds. So these are basically more restricted, typically more restricted dollars that are generated by user fees. So for example, when you buy gas at a gas station and you pay a transportation tax, some of that stays in your local government, but the bulk of it goes to the state coffers. And those dollars are used in a transportation trust fund for transportation projects. We also have a trust fund for housing. So when you buy a house and you have that document stamp tax, that goes into specific trust funds. So these are dollars that are paid by everyday Floridians and potentially visitors, but ultimately the dollars are a little more restricted. And then you have what's called general revenue. The bulk of general revenue, and as you can tell, it's a large chunk of our state budget, $49.4 billion. The bulk of this comes from sales tax, also known as use tax. So when we buy items in Florida and we pay that 6 cents on the dollar, you might have a higher sales tax in your county based on different county referendums, but 6 cents goes into state coffers. So that adds up pretty fast. Now, that's not the only source of revenue in GR. You also have a very small corporate income tax that generates about $5 billion in revenue. There may be some other, well, there are some other, again, not as dramatic sales tax generators out there, but the biggest is that 6 cents per dollar. And then the reason why it's called GR is because it's more flexible. GR can be very malleable, it can go towards where needs are. It doesn't have to be restricted to a specific area of funding. And a lot of folks have asked questions about Bright Futures and also the Florida Lottery. So the Florida Lottery revenue does go into a trust fund, but unfortunately what has happened is even though the Florida Lottery revenue has grown substantially over the past decade, Florida lawmakers basically, instead of enhancing funding for public education, just replaced it with lottery money. And so instead of adding lottery money to education funding to increase it, you could almost imagine as if general revenue that was going towards education went somewhere else and was replaced by lottery money. So it's not that and education funding increased, it basically was net neutral. So that's why you still see challenges with teacher pay, teacher retention, funding for public education, but you also see these ads for how successful the Florida Lottery is. And I should also add that the Florida Lottery, unfortunately, because it is gambling, does have a history of excessive use in low-income communities, which are predominantly communities of color. And when you look at who tends to benefit from Bright Futures, doesn't always match the demographic that is buying the most lottery tickets. So there are some disparity concerns in the context of how the Florida Lottery operates and how the dollars are allocated long term. But that is a conversation for another day. But with that said, we do have, of course, a breakdown of different silos of funding. And as you can tell, human services, which is basically health human services, so health services, Department of Children and Families, the child welfare system, agency of persons with disabilities, et cetera, elder services, those all fall under the human services silo. Education is the second largest, and that includes early ed, K to 12, and higher ed public institutions. And then, as you can see, natural resources is a third. You have the criminal justice system and corrections, general government, and the judicial branch is a very small sliver of the budget. Florida's judicial system can use a lot of more resources. Unfortunately, we operate on a very fee and fine based judicial system, which of course leaves people behind. So as a reminder of the legislative makeup, so there has been some slight changes on this recently because there's been some individuals who have flipped parties recently, some flipping from Democrat to Republican, and some flipping from Democrat to NPA. So I wanted just to provide that quick breakdown of the makeup of the Florida legislature as it is right now. Of course, because Senator Thompson also passed away, there's one less Democrat in the Florida Senate at this time. And there's, like I said, a special election, of course, on the House side as well. But you can see the partisanship is pretty difficult in the sense of balance at this time, but it's important to also know the realities of the legislative makeup. All right, so I want to highlight too just the ways that different organizations and individuals engage with the legislature, because this really is a process that is open to everyone. But of course, it's always hard to know, how do I start? How do I get plugged in? So I wanted to highlight just 6 examples of individuals that engage with the process in different ways. And then we'll actually dive into the substance of the 2025 legislative session. So of course, everybody knows about lobbyists. There's uh, a, a lot of, I think, negative connotation with the term lobbyist, which of course is oftentimes affirmed by, scandalous stories and headlines and so forth. But I also want to always remind folks that a lot of organizations that have very strong brands and missions also have lobbyists. So there's a lot of public interest lobbyists that represent organizations like Planned Parenthood, Equality Florida, NAACP, and others. Just as there's nonprofits like United Way that have a lobby team. So the reality is that a lot of organizations will go through the expense of hiring lobbyists, because you want to make sure that the interests of those you serve, whether it's a corporate client or a grassroots organization or nonprofit clients, are going to be felt and seen in the legislative process. So lobbyists are very universal with the process, and of course they range in their purpose, and some work directly with a firm, while others may be contract lobbyists and are basically hired to represent multiple entities at the same time. Then you have associations. So associations are basically like trade associations. They're groups that they're organizations that represent groups of people with like-minded businesses or professions. So, for example, there's the Association of Social Workers, and they come to Tallahassee to advocate for issues that impact their field. There's associations for the builders, associations for almost every topic you could think about. There's some sort of affiliate association. There's also the League of Cities and the Florida Association of Counties. These are 2 associations that represent local governments respectively, and they interact with the legislature a lot because, of course, legislature is always passing bills that preempt local governments or impact local governments different ways. And then you have constituents, and constituents are incredibly important to our team. And constituents are experts in their areas. You have folks who are teachers or have kids who go to the schools, or they are professionals in different fields of our society. Maybe they're academic experts. Maybe they're retired, but they have a lot of experience in a different field. So constituents can also play a very huge role in legislature. I often look towards constituents that are experts in different arenas to fill us in on what they think about a bill and so forth. So constituents have a very important part in this process and have the opportunity to testify in committee if a bill is also being heard that pertains to a subject related to them. I already mentioned nonprofit organizations, and we'll be repetitive there, but we do work very closely with different nonprofits who might be not just engaging on policy, but also maybe requesting funding as well. So there could be a lot of great opportunities to engage with nonprofits throughout the legislative process and back home as well. We do community events with Keep Orlando Beautiful, with Second Harvest Food Bank, and different partnerships on the ground when we're not in Tallahassee. Of course, donors. And this is where I think the most concern is grown out of, and unfortunately the corruption grows out of, is when you have individuals or corporations that are buying influence in the process. One of the most transparent examples I can give you is Florida Power and Light. So about 2, 3 years ago, there was this huge anti-net metering bill. This was legislation to essentially end the process of having a ROI as a homeowner with rooftop solar. So it would decimate the rooftop solar industry statewide. And FPL actually wrote the bill for a senator and for a House member and gave each of them $10,000 in a donation before session started, and then did it again when session ended. So based on public records requests, it was also proven the FPL had written the bill. So those are the type of stories and examples that I know for me, make the process feel really skeezy and really gross. And unfortunately, it's all too common where individuals who serve on powerful committees end up raising the most money before session starts because individuals are softening uh, their needs, if you will. They're donating in advance to their policy bills, thinking that they can influence this lawmaker to work in their favor. And then finally, state agencies. So every state agency in Florida also has a governmental liaison. They have a governmental affairs professional, maybe more than one. They interact with the legislature on different policy needs. And so almost every agency you could think of, at some point, they're going to have a legislative package because there's going to be some policy issues that they have that they need the legislature to address. And as the executive branch, they're working with the legislative branch in tandem to figure it out. And so there often are going to be, especially in the commerce silo, the health silo, state affairs silo, there's going to be these large agency packages that historically used to be very benign, but unfortunately have become very politicized over the years, where whether it's anti-DI, whether it is oh my God, just conspiracy theories, like anti-vax rhetoric, so forth, finding its way into agency packages. Probably the most obvious example I can share with you from this legislative session was the FDAX bill, which is the Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, also known as the Farm Bill. This was historically, again, not a controversial bill. Everybody could vote yes on it. But this year it included several controversial provisions, including banning the use of terms like burger or meat or milk to describe vegan alternatives. And then also, of course, um, legislation to ban fluoride in Florida water systems was also put into this farm bill. So in most cases, everybody could vote yes on these agency packages, but unfortunately, under the administration of Governor Ron DeSantis, what was once a non-political process has become very political. And then speaking of agencies, I always love to show this breakdown of state government because we forget just how massive state government is. I mean, everybody always talks about how large the federal government it is, which of course, we're seeing that front and center right now. But of course, don't forget about the state government. This impacts your life in so many ways. And so you can see real quick the Florida cabinet, and then the EOG, which is the executive office of the governor, and all the different oversight and jurisdiction and influence an executive branch has, the governor has, in appointing individuals to serve on these agency boards. And then, of course, even bringing the tree down even more to all these agencies that oversee different parts of your life, from from ACA, which is the healthcare agency that regulates healthcare providers, to DOT, to Department of State, which also oversees arts and culture funding. So always want to highlight just how massive state government is and not to overlook that in this process. All right. So we're going to keep going and now dive deeper into the legislative session and the different bills that passed and didn't pass. Okay. So I want to start on a positive and just highlight that because this was such a strange legislative session. And what do I mean by that? So there was and continues to be tension between the Florida House, the Florida Senate, and Governor Ron DeSantis, which is very strange because usually, since every chamber and governor is all the same political party, there was never any type of conflict. Oftentimes, the governor got what he wanted. There was some sort of behind the scenes negotiation for the Senate president and the speaker to also accomplish what their policy goals were. And there really wasn't room for debate. This year was very, very different. What started as, I would say, as solidarity between the House and the Senate has now evolved to be contentious in all ways. And of course, meanwhile, the Florida House launched an investigation into Hope Florida, which I'll talk about more shortly. But for those who don't know, Hope Florida is a quasi public private nonprofit organization created basically to be a slush fund for the first lady. And I argue they duplicate efforts already provided by phenomenal nonprofits like United Way with their 211 line, But either way, you have this nonprofit that was created that is now reported to have laundered $10 million in an ACA Medicaid settlement to itself. And then from Hope, Florida, those $10 million were then given to political entities who campaigned against Amendment 3, which was the cannabis amendment in 2024. So this investigation, I mean, it took a lot of air out of the room, right? It took up a lot of our attention, but it also just further fed the contention between the Speaker of the House and Governor Ron DeSantis. And it wasn't just this issue. We also had debate over, for example, presidential searches. So about 3 years ago, the Florida legislature made the process of presidential searches very private, took it out of the sunshine. It was a bill that I voted no on, but unfortunately it did pass. And that's why for these most recent university and college presidential searches, we are seeing individuals be handpicked to serve in these very prestigious and also well compensated roles. And so the Florida House has been leading the charge and putting transparency back in that process, which Governor DeSantis doesn't like. We also had legislation that would prohibit state employees from raising money while they're in the position of a state employee. This is the state version of the Hatch Act, a bill that we passed on the Florida House side that, of course, the governor doesn't like because the bill is inspired by the fact that his chief of staff, now Attorney General James Uthmeier, served as the chair of a political committee to campaign during 2024. So these bills created even more conflict between the governor's office and the legislature, which helped to lead to a lot of bad bills not passing, right? So this is a quick example. It's not every bill, but it's a pretty good breakdown of 60 different bills, actually more, about 19 different bills that would have really concerning impact on our economy, on women's reproductive rights, on LGBTQ plus issues, on legal aid resources that did not pass. And just to grab a few of them for you as examples, there HB 1517, Senate Bill 1284. This bill would have essentially granted fetuses and embryos the same legal rights as living children. So this bill is incredibly concerning. Florida already has a 6-week abortion ban, which 57% of Floridians oppose across party lines. And yet, despite that strong message that we don't want to see more restrictions on reproductive rights, this bill was filed. But it didn't pass the Senate, so it has not become law. Another example, expanding Florida's book bans. We've already seen this issue in Florida. We are already navigating the consequences of it, and yet they wanted to pursue more restrictions on literature. That bill passed the House, but not the Senate. More barriers to unemployment benefits. The unemployment system in Florida is so broken. It's very difficult to access unemployment benefits in our state. Instead of improving the program, there was a bill on the House floor to make it worse, to make it even more difficult to navigate and to receive your benefits, which are very meager in the state of Florida, but still important for someone to have. That bill did not pass. So I always like to highlight, some of the positives. And of course, oftentimes when you're a Democrat in the Florida legislature, you have to measure success by the bad bills you stop. So I am really proud of the Democratic caucus and of our collective efforts to find commonality across the aisle on some of these issues to ensure that they do not make it through to the governor's office this year. All right. So some other proactive positive bills that did pass, um, protecting state parks. So this was a bipartisan bill born out of the controversy of last summer, where a whistleblower reported that there was going to be mass development on several state parks in Florida to build a pickleball courts, hotels, and so forth. So this was a good bipartisan bill, just like House Bill 1143, to essentially say that you cannot just develop over our state parks, and it preserves a public-facing process if there is a desire to change the composition of a state park. So really good bipartisan bill. We also saw legislation on condos. So this is a really big important issue. As y'all know, following the Surfside tragedy, the legislature pursued an omnibus condo reform bill that created a lot of cost issues for condo owners in the sense that yes, safety is important, but many of our condo owners are on a fixed income and could not afford the requirements in the bill for different infrastructure and reserve needs. So this legislation, which I worked on with Representative Vicky Lopez, who is Republican, gives condo associations more time to complete structural integrity inspections and more flexibility to meet these new financial reserve requirements, including to finance big ticket items through lines of credit versus having that cash on hand. It also sets clarity on which condos are required to follow these laws, and it promotes transparency by requiring online access to board meetings and prohibits conflict of interest in repair contracts. I do want to highlight that this issue, like so many issues, is never going to ever be completely done, right? Because when you're working on policy that's this complex, there's always going to be things that people miss. There's always going to be new problems that show up. So, though I do think this is a step in the right direction, by no means do I think that this is, a closed issue. I think you always will see areas to improve Florida's condo laws, especially as it pursues uh, impacts on consumer protections. I already mentioned the state version of the Hatch Act, so I won't be repetitive there. The free kill law. So this is actually an issue that Governor DeSantis said he's going to veto the bill, but it has to do with tort, and it has to do with these tragic situations where individuals have lost their loved ones because they don't fit this very strict criteria of who qualifies to bring a civil matter to court because they're single and uh, not within a specific age range. Those families have no path to justice. So we've basically repealed that restriction in Florida law, which took several years to do. But now Governor DeSantis says he's going to veto this issue. So I'm hopeful that we'll see a override of this veto. And of course, my heart goes out to all the family members who've been advocating on this issue, only to met with Governor DeSantis saying that he's not going to sign the bill into law. So be on standby for more work in that arena. And then just some other topics too, public access to beaches. This is more of a North Florida topic. Um, North Florida years ago because of, I think it was Mike Huckabee who had a beach house in Florida, privatized the beaches. And it's been a huge controversy in the Panhandle for years. So legislation was passed to make those beaches public again. So a good policy for folks in the Gulf. I do want to highlight some other bills that we're not going to have time to talk about. I'm going to mention them later, but I want to uplift them quickly if I can in the healthcare space and also in the veterans benefit space. So we did see legislation pass to create more transparency with the APD waitlist, that is the Agency for Persons with Disabilities. Of course, this waitlist is huge. Right now, it's upwards of 22 some thousand people with disabilities are waiting for services. There will be families that lose loved ones and people who die while waiting for services. So as we go into the state budget and debate the state budget, you could count on us to be advocating to eliminate this wait list. But policy-wise, legislation was passed to essentially create requirements of data reporting by APD to also give ACA more regulatory responsibility over APD and to make sure that the pilot program is still voluntary. So the bill does expand a pilot program for Medicaid managed care, but it still remains its voluntary status. As we know, many Floridians do not want that option. And so that bill was an issue of a lot of focus this session, alongside additional expansions to mental health services, including efforts to diverge to, I'm sorry, to, yes, to diverge individuals from criminality to mental health support. So specifically, there was legislation that was bipartisan. Representative Dan Daly was the Democrat prime co on it that essentially tries to support individuals who are experiencing mental health crisis instead of being diverted directly to the prison system for going to a drug court instead, to also expand veteran court services as well. So there was some very thoughtful bipartisan legislation trying to better improve our mental health systems and programs. Again, a lot more work to do in that regard, but it's been really promising to see some of the commitments by colleagues across the aisle and, of course, Democrats to try to improve some of these basic systems of support for families of Floridians in need. To be clear, we still have a long way to go, but at least there was some great bipartisan work in those arenas. With that said, to talk about some concerning bills that passed. So probably one of the most concerning bills that passed on the last day of regular session was House Bill 1205, and this legislation that undermines the citizen-led constitutional amendment process. So as everyone here probably knows, amendments 3 and 4 were both bills, I'm sorry, were both policy initiatives that were led by citizens. So individuals collected signatures, organizations raised the funds, and got these issues on the ballot, and then they went before the voters to decide on. And despite the fact that both these issues got over 50%, they did not meet the 60% threshold to become codified into our Constitution. But of course, it still demonstrates how Floridians support this process of a citizen-led constitutional amendment and don't want to see it go away. Well, the legislature got a different message, right? And so legislature essentially is trying to make this process more difficult by requiring that you turn in collected forms within 10 days. Right now it's 30 days. So they want to change it to 10 days. It also increases the fines and fees by, in some cases, 50. So $1,000 fee becomes a $50,000 fee. And it also restricts the amount of signatures a volunteer can collect to 25. And it's not 25 per month, that is 25 in totality. So as you can imagine, this legislation is very concerning. And the second the governor signed it into law, which he did at around 11 o'clock at night, a lawsuit was filed that following Monday. So this issue is being litigated, but it has led to organizations already pulling back their signature collection, among other pauses and compliance changes in their operations. So I already mentioned some of these bills, but to uplift, I forgot to bold it, so it's kind of hard to see, but Senate Bill 56. So this feeds into the chemtrail conspiracy theory. Basically, it bans weather modification in Florida, reminiscent of rhetoric by Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, saying that liberals were creating hurricanes in red states. So this bill like bans that topic. We also see, of course, House Bill 443. There were several different bills that continue to expand the privatization of Florida public education. Several bills. We already have universal vouchers in our state, which are, of course, pulling public dollars away from traditional public schools into private schools, some that have no accredited teachers, no accountability, some that students end up not doing well in. So the student goes back to public schools with the money not following them for that semester, for that year. But this privatization of our public education system is creating huge disparities, with Orange County Public Schools, one of the largest school districts in the country, having to lay off 800 teachers, despite the fact that we have a teacher shortage. And so with that already in play, this year, there were several issues to further privatize public education through charter schools. And that includes, of course, giant education packages that would even allow for what are called schools of hope, which is a major priority of a big DeSantis donor named Ken Griffin. It would allow schools of hope, which are charter schools, to open up inside a public school. So if a public school has vacant uses, like they have vacant buildings or classrooms because of students going to private schools or being homeschooled, that Schools for Hope would be able to open up a charter school inside a public school, basically trying to destroy public education from the inside versus from the outside. So incredibly concerning. And of course, part of the last minute amendments to these education bills included the ability for a traditional public school to become a charter school without teacher input. And so this obviously makes the process even less democratic and ignores the will or position of teachers who work in that school for having a say if the school becomes a charter school. And I see some good questions coming in. I will grab them all very soon. We're almost wrapped up with the policy slides. And I see a few questions about the school budget. We'll talk about that soon, but as a reminder, we don't have a budget yet. So there's a lot of concerns about funding for AP classes, IB classes, Cambridge classes, all these educational enhancement programs and those concerns are very valid. But the positive news is that none of those fights have been decided. The state budget is what is being debated in the next 3 weeks. So there is going to be an opportunity for families, for Floridians to advocate for funding of public education and to protect these programs. That fight is not over yet. So we scheduled this legislative session review when we thought that legislative session was going to end on May 2nd. But because session is not over yet, the budget conversations are to be continued. So we'll talk a little bit about how you can help advocate all those issues, but please know that we don't have any final updates on the education budget because we don't even know what the total funding for the budget will look like yet. But we'll know all of that in the next days and weeks to come. Okay, let me see. And then I already talked about the Farm Bill. And then, of course, Senate Bill 1388, which I think the governor just signed into law today, would allow for boats to anchor in environmentally sensitive areas. It also bans a local government's ability to say that, this lake cannot have uh, gas-powered jet skis or things like that. So another preemption that has to do with fossil fuels was in that bill as well. So other bills of concern that I want us to be on the lookout for. So one of them is Senate Bill 180. So 180, when it was first moving through the process, was very non-controversial. Unfortunately, it has since become controversial with specific sections in the bill that could impact land use comp plans across the state of Florida. The bill's intention is to help improve and streamline hurricane responsiveness or responses to any natural disasters. But because of an effort to make it easier to rebuild after a storm, the language could also be interpreted to basically eliminate land use comp plans across the state of Florida. So very concerned about this. We're digging into it as we continue this extended session, but do want to uplift for folks, especially if you've advocated for the rural boundary in Orange County or other counties, that this bill with this language could impact that entire approach and efforts to have responsible land uses policies in place. So another huge education bill, House Bill 1255. Originally, this bill included the Baby Olivia video, which was incredibly concerning. We were actually able to remove that language from the bill. For those who don't remember, the Baby Olivia video was essentially an effort to force our schools to show anti-abortion propaganda in the classroom. And this video is created by an anti-abortion organization. I mean, it's really gross, especially for those that say they don't want to indoctrinate our children in our schools. This was the clearest example of indoctrination I've ever seen in our schools. So we did get this language removed, but I suspect it'll come back. So we should be ready to fight back again in the future. But though those parts were removed from the bill, it still included the expansion of the conservatives' classic learning test and a few other again benefits for charter schools. So it was a huge win to get that language removed, but parts of the bill were still not perfect. But nonetheless, the pressure and the advocacy worked because when this bill first came to the House floor, the language was in the bill, and then when it came back, it was removed. And then I'm just gonna grab a tissue real quick because I can feel myself getting a little snotty, so I apologize. This is what happens when you're presenting a Zoom while also being sick. So I appreciate y'all's grace. Okay, so let me see what else. Okay, so House Resolution 1215. So this has to do with um, tangible personal property, which in the case of this bill specifically focuses on the agricultural community and essentially exempts the agricultural community from any type of TPP on their heavy equipment. As nice as this bill sounds, in sense of supporting the ag community, it's important to note that the impact is huge on some rural counties that don't have a lot of other revenue streams. And of course, it would mostly benefit large corporations that have multiple TPP accounts. So I think it's a bill of concern because it basically is going to impact rural communities that don't have a lot of tax revenue options. And it really will benefit larger corporations over smaller rural individuals. All right, keep moving forward. So we talked about a few of these. I saw some questions come up on these topics. So I'm gonna grab them as well. And so the budget, right? So funding for public education. I already talked about it a little bit, but do appreciate y'all amplifying this conversation a lot as it is super, super, super important. And so we are still in the middle, right, of this budget process. And to give you more of a insight to that, what we're waiting for right now is something called allocations. So allocations is basically the amount of money per silo that the House and the Senate agree upon. So I mentioned this a little bit earlier in those first slides of the pie charts of the state budget. So there's an agreement in the beginning of the budget process of how much money will go to each of these categories. So the House and the Senate have not agreed to these categories yet. So that's why it's hard for me to tell you where the education budget is right now because we just don't know, right? But with that said, this is the time to advocate. This is the time to contact your state representatives and your state senators on education funding, on any funding issue you care about, but especially public education, and just say, my kid goes to a public school, or I love my public schools, and I'm worried about your early funding proposals, right? So I really do encourage y'all to use your voice, to put pressure on the budget process since we're just beginning to start it, because this is a very unique opportunity where really the main issues in front of us are super narrow, right? All those other bills that I talked about, they're basically off the table. There's the extended session only applies to a few issues, the state budget and the rural renaissance package, which of course there could be vehicles where other policies are added to these bills. So always have to be on the lookout for, those types of shenanigans. But ultimately, a lot of the other issues that we fight for are not necessarily on the table right now. So this is a great opportunity to really hone in on the budget and to make your voices heard loud and clear. So property insurance. So I saw some questions in the chat with property insurance. Incredibly concerning that when it comes to the issue of housing affordability, there was no real movement at all. Now, there was legislation on the Live Local Act, which has had a lot of controversy at local level with a lot of folks expressing concern about the actual functionality of this bill. And as a reminder, the Live Local Act is from 3 sessions ago. It was a large omnibus affordable housing package trying to increase affordable housing stock, but unfortunately has really not had the type of effect that many said it would in the sense of expediting these processes. So every year thereafter, we've been tweaking the Live Local Act, and of course, trying to increase things like ADUs, trying to, of course, protect funding for affordable housing projects, which we will be fighting for this year. But in the context of rental assistance, in the context of renters' rights, property insurance, um, you know, uh, my Safe Florida Home program, we have not seen major movement on these topics at all. And I'll add too that many of us filed bills on these issues, but those bills either never got a hearing or did not get to the finish line. On property insurance, the Florida House did pass legislation to hold property insurance executives accountable and candidly to try to go after the shell game that the Tampa Bay Times reported that property insurance companies were playing. Where, if you might remember this story, there were property insurance companies that were claiming insolvency, but really they moved their profits into other entities. And so they were screaming insolvency, asking for help, but really they were shifting their dollars away to different places to hide their profits. So though the Florida House did lead on legislation in this area, the Florida Senate did not entertain it. So I have no doubt that we'll be continuing on this fight. Personally, one of the bills that I really care about too is to ensure there's an option for universal windstorm coverage for Floridians who cannot afford insurance in the private market for storm coverage, for windstorm coverage damage, for there to be a public option or a nonprofit option. So we will be continuously pushing that way. And there's going to be some more information specifically about how we continue to give insurance companies an upper hand to pick and choose their consumers while citizens continues to carry the brunt of the more difficult claims. And this continues to give the private sector not only the advantage, which again, if you want to, if somebody argue that's okay, but it's not fair to give them an advantage when they're also upcharging everyone, right? So there will be some more reporting on that subject in the future as well. So stay tuned for that. But there really wasn't, unfortunately, a lot of movement on this issue, even though we know how important it is to everyday Floridians. With that said, on the state budget, we will be advocating for additional dollars to the My Safe Florida Home program, which is very, very important as a program that gives Floridians extra support and the hardening of your home, with the thought that it will then impact your insurance claim down the road, and hopefully also give you a better premium because you've been able to get that new roof or harden your windows and so forth. So on the budget side, all those issues are still up for debate. Finally, the tax package, right? So I mentioned earlier the importance of the tax package in the sense that the tax package determines how much money we have in the state budget. So there's a lot of different debates happening right now. Sales tax, property tax, and the TDT, which is the tourism development tax, are all being debated. I want to first flag and provide some comfort on the TDT because one of the early House proposals basically took the tourism development tax and took 75% of it, took it away from local governments, and would require local governments use it for property tax reduction. As you can imagine, a lot of folks are concerned about this because the TDT in a lot of municipalities is used to help respond to the impact of tourism in our communities. Unfortunately, in some counties like Orange County, it's very restricted to the promotion of tourism, which I do advocate for more flexibility with TDT funds. Excuse me, but not to the levels where local governments have no ability to really have control over those dollars. So fortunately, let me get some water real quick. Sorry, y'all. I'm recovering from a cold, so I should not be doing this presentation, but here we are. Here we are. So with that said, the TDT on the House side, that bill does not seem like it has any momentum at all. So the good news is that the legislature's effort to essentially take away TDT funding is highly unlikely to pass. However, on the flexibility front, I will say that the Florida Senate, thanks to the leadership of Senator Carlos Gabriel Smith, has in the Senate tax package legislation that will offer some more flexibility for local governments. By basically saying that you are required to spend either 50 million or 40% of your TDT on the promotion of tourism, whichever is less. And then you can spend the rest on different types of uses. This would really impact Orange County because right now we have a 40% restriction where we have to spend 40% on promotion of tourism or we can't use it on other infrastructure needs. And so we're never going to reach that 40% because it's just too much. To lowering that threshold is very important to flex for those who care about flexibility. With that said, both sales tax and property tax are issues being debated right now. On the sales tax front, I also don't think we're going to see reduction in sales tax, despite that being a major point of contention for the Florida House's tax package. It was just announced earlier today that the Florida House is potentially moving away from their sales tax position and perhaps doing a BRT elimination, which is the business rent tax, which a lot of folks have advocated for over the years. And then on the property tax front, as I mentioned, Governor Ron DeSantis has been pushing for a complete elimination of property taxes. And as good as it sounds, it has a lot of consequences because we're talking about $50 billion in local revenue that pays for public education, police, fire, trash pickup, your basic governmental services. And replacing that money has a big question mark. How do you replace $50 billion? Well, some folks have pivoted to sales tax, that you can potentially double Florida's sales tax. So if you double our sales tax, not only are you creating a more regressive tax system, which means those who make less will pay more in their income and taxation, but you're also creating a less stable revenue source, because sales tax fluctuates based on consumers' ability to buy things, right? So, God forbid we're in a recession or experience another type of decline in travel and so forth, you're going to see a huge reduction in your revenue. So that's why a good tax structure has multiple sources of revenue generation that are diverse. That's why you have use tax and income tax that is in other states, they have income taxes. We only have an income tax on corporations. We don't have a personal income tax. But other states will have value taxes, TPP taxes. They're going to have income taxes, because the whole point is that despite the economic situation around you, there is still revenue coming in to pay for essential services, right? So there is a new select committee on property taxes that has been created that we are proudly serving on. And I will keep folks posted on the property tax conversations, because I do think there's always room for reform on any issue, especially property taxes. Because I will say, one of the challenges we are seeing right now for new homeowners, especially younger homeowners, is due to the impact of safer homes and portability. If you're a long-time homeowner, you can pretty much maintain a reduced property tax, because you've been able to not only build up safer homes over time, but you have that portability, right? Where you can transfer it. If you're a first-time homeowner and you're looking at Zillow and you're saying, okay, what is the current property tax that the current resident is paying? It is not accurate to what you'll be paying. So there's a lot of sticker shock, if you will, for new homeowners that are buying a home in Florida and realizing, oh my gosh, my property taxes are so much higher because I'm just now starting to pay taxes on a home at its current value versus the suppressed value that a more established homeowner was paying. And so there's a question, versus should there be some sort of sliding scale for homeowners? Should there be some sort of glide path for a new homeowner? But those are all some of the debates and conversations that we're having. And I do want you all to know that I'm very open to all your suggestions and feedback, and definitely want to hear it. So don't be shy to send it our way. And I know some folks are hopping off. As a reminder, we're scheduled to go towards 7:30. So I'll be here till 7:30 to answer questions. But I know if folks have to hop off at the hour, totally get it. But we schedule this to be 90 minutes because we always assume that we'll need more than an hour to get through the content. But it is recorded and will be on our Facebook page and posted on our YouTube channel later. So if folks do have to hop off because we're at that hour mark, not a problem. But do know that we'll work to answer your questions shortly, and we're scheduled to go towards 7:30. And then Susan also wrote in the chat, higher homestead exemption. Absolutely. That also could be one of the ideas that we pursue. And as a reminder, any type of property tax issue has to go before the voters. So regardless of what ideas we come up with, it is the voters who would ultimately vote yes or no on a question on the ballot. It would have to get 60% to pass for there to be any changes with property taxes. I know I talked about the budget a lot, but I do want to just direct your attention to two buttons on the main page of flhouse.gov, where, again, if you want to dive more into the budget process, just check out these two topics. And who knows, maybe I'll do a virtual event just on the budget, since there's a lot of great questions here. So y'all are going to be some ideas. If you would be interested in a virtual event just focus on the budget, feel free to drop in the chat and I can put something together. Hopefully I won't be sick when I do that one. Okay, I'm seeing some good vibes. Okay, cool. All right, I see y'all. Okay, stay tuned. We will do a Zoom just on the budget, because it is such a complicated process that we don't have time to do it tonight, but I'm very happy to do that. So I will get that scheduled and put that together for y'all. So I got you. See, I'm with you. I'm grateful for my fellow nerds out there who want to do that. That sounds great. Okay. So I already mentioned the Hope Florida scandal. Okay, real quick. I'm shifting to some quick policy news, if you will, like things that have happened recently in the headlines that interact with state government, and then I'll grab your questions. So Um, I appreciate y'all's kind words. You're so sweet. Drunken Monkey soup and cookies. Drunken Monkey does have the best soup. You're spot on. Okay. So Hope, Florida. I just want to share this graphic with you. I actually did share this on our social media account as well, but it just highlights the direction of that $10 million that, as I mentioned, uh, was traveled to different political entities that then use this public money to campaign on. So you can find this graphic on our Facebook page. I could definitely message it to, I'll email it out to everyone so you have it after this call is over. But it really does provide a great review of how this money was laundered. And I think it's something that you should share with your friends, your family, with your supporters, because it just shows how corrosive this whole process is and um, how easy it is, right? When you're not paying attention or when government officials honestly just get so power hungry that they have a complete disregard towards following the law and just assume that no one's going to hold them accountable. The good news is that two members of Congress, Congresswoman Kathy Castor and Congressman Darren Soto, have also announced a federal investigation into Hope, Florida. So this is not over. We are just getting started. So stay tuned for more updates on this controversy. Okay. I mentioned earlier legislation to protect Florida's state parks was passed. However, despite that effort across the aisle, we are already seeing efforts by a private landowner to land swap 600 acres of state-owned land in the Guana River Wildlife Management Area. This private company called the Upland LLC was like just created, and we have no idea who's behind this private company. Oh, they withdraw their application? Oh my God, that's great. And I literally haven't seen an update yet. Oh, good. That's great. Okay. I think everyone should still like use this if you want to. Okay. I dropped this link in the chat, but this is a petition from Florida Wildlife Federation. The only reason why you might still want to send a message is because you'll be added to their email list and you'll be kept in the light of these new type of efforts to destroy our environment. So I definitely consider joining their email list anyways on their website for Florida Wildlife Federation. But I'm very happy to hear that they withdrew their application. We had posted about this earlier this morning too, so I love hearing that. So thanks for the update. That's fantastic. All right, another win for the environment. I love that. Okay, not so good news. So this is very wonky, and it happened like I think it was like Thursday night. I mean, it's just it happened at a point where not a lot of people are paying attention, right? So, what is a judicial waiver? If you are under the age of 18 and you experience an unplanned pregnancy and you don't have a parent or guardian to talk to, or you're not comfortable talking to them for fear of punishment, there is this process called judicial bypass, also known as judicial waiver, where you can attempt to go before a judge and prove to the judge that you're mature enough to make a decision about your pregnancy. You're mature enough to end your pregnancy. Ironically, if you choose to carry the pregnancy to term and become a parent, then you don't have to get permission from a judge. But if you choose to end that pregnancy, Florida forces you to go in this process because we are a parental notification and a consent state. This process of judicial bypass is the safety valve for really concerning and sensitive situations like abuse, like children in the foster care system, like neglect, unaccompanied minors. And so the population that seeks a judicial waiver is very, very, very small. In fact, based on data from last year, because of Florida's 6-week abortion ban, and yes, PEG, incest, another example, Indiana, it all has to be under 6 weeks. So even if you're a minor who is seeking a judicial waiver, it has to be within 6 weeks. So it's already a very difficult process to do because most folks don't even know they're pregnant at 6 weeks. let alone someone under the age of 18. But with that said, based on 2024 data, 130, about 130 teenagers went through this process. Not all of them were approved, but only 130 teenagers in the state of Florida went through the judicial waiver process. In one of those cases, a 17-year-old had her waiver denied by the first judge. So she appealed the decision to an appellate court, the 5th DCA. At 11:54 p.m., Florida's appointed Attorney General James Uthmeyer, inserted himself into this case and claimed that due to parental rights and the 14th Amendment, that because the parent or guardian couldn't object to this minor's decision in a courtroom, that judicial waivers are unconstitutional in Florida. And as you can imagine, this 3-panel appellate court, all men, all conservative judges, agree with the Attorney General and deemed all judicial waivers unconstitutional in Florida. This happened just last week. And we are getting reports now of waiver cases that are being dismissed because of this ruling. And this ruling is not only likely going to go to the state Supreme Court, but it could go to the U.S. Supreme Court and potentially eliminate judicial bypass for teens across the country. So it's incredibly concerning. Not enough people are talking about it. I did a video on it last week. I've only done one interview on it so far because it's just not getting that kind of attention that it deserves. And I assume it's because it impacts such a small group of young people. But these are the most vulnerable of Floridians. Like, these are the most vulnerable of Floridians. More than 2/3 of teenagers in this situation talk to their parent guardian about ending their pregnancy. For the third that don't, it's due to these really difficult circumstances. And so please spread the word. I just dropped a link in the chat for folks to be able to read about this more and share more information about it. But it's just incredibly, incredibly concerning. And yes, another Handmaid's Tale. And if you think they're going to stop at people under the age of 18, absolutely not. They always start there, but they don't stop there, right? Just like with attacks on gender affirming care for the trans community, they always start with talking about children and those under the age of 18, but their intention is to eliminate care for everyone, right? That is always the goal. And so, let me see. Oh, I see a question from Lynette. What are their plans to support those young people once they give birth? No plans, right? We don't have universal childcare. Like, good luck is the mantra, right? Very frustrating. All right, I'm gonna keep going. But today there was an announcement from the Supreme Court of the United States regarding our Venezuelan community members on TPS, basically saying that Trump's goals to deport individuals with TPS from Venezuelan descent can move forward. Incredibly concerning. And I know there are lawyers who are working on this right now and trying to find ways to support our community members who are on TPS. I think it's really important for everyone to know their rights in the context of all the attacks that the immigrant community is facing. And so I always want to uplift how to reduce risk to yourself if faced with a question about your immigration status, and also what your rights are. So please, please, please be proactive in all of this. Share know your rights resources to loved ones. We also have red cards at our legislative office. If you don't know what a red card is, it's basically the size of a business card. It's called a red card because they're printed on red paper, but it just is it's double-sided. One side is in English, the other side is different language, and it basically outlines what your rights are. You can present it to law enforcement or to immigration enforcement if you are stopped, and it says, I know what my rights are. I wish to speak to an attorney before I speak to you. And so we have them available in English and Spanish, and English and Haitian Creole at our legislative office. You're welcome to come by and pick some up if you'd like some. So just want you'll know that it's very, very important to uplift as it pertains to knowing your rights. And then ways to get involved. So obviously at Timana, we have a lot going on. And so always want to encourage folks to get plugged into our work. And I won't review every one of these little boxes because y'all can see them, but we have so many ways to get plugged in, from local meetings and events, community outreach. We're tabling all the time. We're doing door knocking. We have our library office hours this summer. Like, we're doing it all. Contact your lawmakers, as I noted. Like, this is the best time to contact lawmakers on any budget issues, and to contact lawmakers on policies while they're back in their districts. Other voter registration, we're doing a lot of voter registration drives. In fact, I think the next slide, if you want to volunteer with our voter registration organization, that's called People Power for Florida. This is a statewide organization I started about 4 years ago. We provide statewide voter registration alongside vote by mail renewals, voter empowerment activities. We work with other organizations like Indivisible and other community partners like Youth Action Fund to help get out the vote and get people civically minded. So we have a voluntary, we're hosting monthly volunteer orientations. The next one's June 9th, and they're virtual as well. We have virtual phone banking. So if you want to see all of our events, you can definitely sign up at on mobilize.us/Honor for Florida. So that's where we list all of our community events. And then is Orlando organizing June 14th March? Yes, we are. There is a march at Orlando City Hall on June 14th, 5 to 7 o'clock. I have an email blast going out later this week about it, and we'll also post online about it more as well. And then Leslie, we touched base on this already, but I'll go ahead and uplift it for you as it pertains to funding for AP, IB, Cambridge, and so forth. All those issues are still up for debate because we don't have a finalized state budget yet. And so because the state budget is still being debated, the topic of the Education Conformity Bill, House Bill 1505, which was the House bill on this issue, are still not finalized yet. So we can still fight those issues. So I don't really have a final answer because nothing's over yet. So that's why I'm really encouraging folks to contact your state representatives on this issue, because we're still going to be debating both the state budget and all the conforming bills, including the Education Conformity Bill. And House Bill 1505 is the Education Budget Conforming Bill. So it's not a regular bill in the context that it only has policy in it. It's a funding bill. So it determines, it outlines how state dollars are spent. And so this vehicle, this issue, is still very much alive. And so that's why we don't have any final answers, if that makes sense. And so who to write to? Great question. I would encourage not just your own representative, which is very important, but I would continue to put pressure on the chairs of both of the education subcommittees. So as a reminder, and I can maybe do let's see what my next slide was, a thank you slide. Yes, okay. So let me go ahead and do another screen share for you guys. Okay. So I am sharing our flhouse.gov. So Representative Persis Mullica is the chair of the pre-K budget subcommittee, and this is the vice chair. So these are the two folks I would contact more than anyone else, but you also contact your own representative. But these are the individuals that basically carry the education budget silo. Like Representative Mullica, Persis Mullica is the sponsor of the Education Conformity Bill. And so these are definitely some of the folks that I would put pressure on as well. And then Dr. Ferris, cybersecurity. There's been a lot of conversation on cybersecurity, but I haven't necessarily seen any new policy. There was one bill that prohibits the use of security cameras to use AI to detect gun ownership, like to detect someone carrying a gun, which I voted no on because I think we need that technology in public spaces to be able to identify who has a firearm in case there is a tragedy. But beyond that, I haven't really seen any, beyond recent legislation to try to streamline Florida's cybersecurity reporting process and action response. So when there is a data breach, to strengthen our reporting to not only send that information to the right place, but then to, of course, lock down your systems and to prevent more data from being lost. Excuse me. I've not seen any new bills around cybersecurity this session, but always happy to chat more about it as well. Yes, facts. I love that. I love that, Dr. Spano. That's great. Okay, so that's the House side. Back to this question on education on the Senate side. So the Senate side has, a similar structure. So if you go to committee list, you want to just look for the Appropriations Committee on Pre-K 12 Education. And then that would be Danny Burgess. So you'd want to contact the chair of this committee for your budget points, right, on education. So these are the folks that you want to contact to influence the most, but obviously it's good to also contact your own representative as well. I hear you guys. It's tough out there. I'm with you. It's tough out there. Okay. So I am going to grab questions now. So let me go ahead and stop my screen real quick because actually, I have a questions doc. Yeah, okay. I'm actually going to keep it on the Florida House homepage in case I need it. But I'm going to start grabbing your questions right now too. All right, I'm gonna grab as many as I can, and there are a lot, so there's 4 pages of questions. I'm gonna do my best, okay? So starting from the first category of federal, we got a few questions about federal issues. So Dr. Finkel asked, how much of the federal funds are part of the budget at risk of being cut by the quote, big, beautiful bill? I mean, a lot is at risk, especially with Medicaid, right? So I mentioned how Florida's state budget is also reliant on the federal government. A lot of that is Medicaid. And so if you cut Medicaid, you're absolutely cutting the healthcare funding for some of the most vulnerable Floridians in our state. Medicaid helps support those with disabilities, it helps support those that are elderly. If you cut Medicaid, you are cutting our budget in droves. So we are very much at risk of what's happening to the federal government. Lynette asked a similar question around, what conversations are happening with Florida's budget if Congress pushes share costs on Medicaid SNAP down to the states. No conversations have happened so far. I mean, we've asked this question of our Republican colleagues, but nobody has answered it. But it is a very real concern. Vicky also asked similar, what will Florida do if NOAA and FEMA are cut with hurricane season coming up? Again, no clear answer on that whatsoever. Florida is very reliant on FEMA reimbursement, just like any state is. So hurricane season is about to start, and it's incredibly concerning if we don't have a strong federal agencies in response to these needs. I see a question about how can we become less dependent on federal assistance? Honestly, the only way to do that is if Florida were to create a new revenue stream, because the expenses are so real, right? But the notion of Florida ever creating a new tax is just close to impossible. But you would have to find different ways to generate revenue, and it's just not popular to do so. Yeah, so worried about Susan also is worried about federal education dollars, 100%. Very, very concerning. And yes, Lynette, we are interdependent. We do, like, the budget is a third funded by the federal government, right? So it's like $117 billion, and a third of it is federally funded. So you could cut a third and like try to figure it out, right? But it's just a lot of money that pays for very vulnerable people's needs. So it's just not, it's not even the fact that you're losing money, right? It's like you're losing money for a category of need that's very, very critical. And so we barely can afford like basic government systems as we have now. Our wait hours, like the time it takes to get someone on the phone for unemployment for Medicaid is disastrous. The time to get your services, or if you're a person with disabilities, or if you're an elder trying to get assistance for respite for a loved one, I mean, we already have underfunded government institutions. Even the legislature, our district has 188,000 people. We only have 2 staffers. Like that's just not compatible to a state with our size. And yet that is how we operate, right? So it's just it's a having federal support as a partnership is very, very important. And not having it is a huge loss to us. And it's important to remember this because obviously Governor DeSantis continuously demonize the Biden administration like every day. And yet we were always reliant on state dollars, regardless of the partisanship of both offices. So important to emphasize that. Okay, shifting to some other legislative budget questions. So what has been done with homeowners insurance in Florida? As I noted earlier, nothing at this point. The Florida House had proposals. We passed them off the House floor. The Senate did not. So it is an issue we're going to have to continue to work on. And when you can watch the recording back, you'll see us talk about it even more. So Deanna wrote, several of the bills I have been tracking passed either House or Senate or both, but ended up being postponed or withdrawn for consideration. It's hard for me to answer this question. The question is it likely that these bills will come back in current extended session or will appear by the same sponsor? So they will not appear in extended session because extended session is more limited to specific bill topics. It can't include every bill topic. So they could be refiled. Also, sometimes the bill is withdrawn and a new version of that bill is filed. So I would double check to make sure that the bill wasn't refiled as a new version. I think we talked a lot about privatizing public education. So and the voucher. So I feel like we cover those topics pretty well. There are efforts to put restrictions on vouchers, but as you can imagine, the Republican legislature has not been supportive of those efforts. But we are, as Democrats, always try to put more accountability on the voucher system. Lynette also asked about the TDT. I think I tackled that one already. We talked about affordable housing, so I do appreciate this question. Was there a change to the local law to stop NIMBY? So there was an effort to try to help with ADUs, to expand ADUs. That bill, I don't believe passed the Senate, but it did pass the House. And then I see a question, what happened to Senator Broder's Medicaid Review Committee bill? I'm not sure specifically what bill this is. If you have a bill number, that's super helpful for me. But do keep me posted if it comes to you. But if you're referencing APD, which you might be, as it pertains to transparency of the APD system, that bill did pass and will become law, most likely. But I'm not sure if you're referencing something else, Leslie. So feel free to drop me a line later with the bill number and I can double check for you. And then Thomas writes, love to chat about 1203. So I don't think that bill moved at all. Let me double check. I'll just search right here. Barnaby, yes, this bill had 4 committee stops and did not get any hearings. So if you have more questions, please let me know, but that bill did not seem to have a lot of traction. And then some Facebook questions, shifting over to Facebook audience. And we're at 7:30 right now, so I'll be wrapping up shortly. We have a few more questions left from our Facebook audience I want to try to grab real quick. Okay, so Mary asked, can the override happen before session ends or does it need to wait until next session? So that's a great question. I suspect you're referring to veto overrides. So veto overrides can happen during extended session. And one reason why we are setting the governor bills while we're in extended session is because when you are in session, the timeline the governor has to make a decision on the bill shrinks to 7 days. So for example, there were several bills that were given to the governor today on May 19th. He only has till May 26th to respond, to either sign the bill or veto the bill or not sign it, it becomes law automatically. And so if he vetoes one of the bills, for example, that we gave him today, we could override it while we're in session. So we do have to be physically in Tallahassee to override a veto. And you can call a special session to also override vetoes. So I hope that answers your question. And asks, do you think the speaker is well-intentioned with his stance on what some would call nonpartisan issues? I do, yes. Speaker Perez and I have a really great relationship. Um, I have, despite the fact that we disagree on a lot of issues, we do respect one another, and I have no doubt that he's operating in, a place of his ideological viewpoints. Like, I have no doubt that he believes what he says, even if I disagree with it sometimes. I know he's coming from his own place of policy position. So we talked about, Scott also asked about the override. We talked about that. I actually feel on the free kill bill, I feel more confident that the Florida House will override a veto of free kill, but we need to apply pressure to the Senate. So want to really emphasize that. Uh, okay, question from the Mary. We need more condo restrictions and regulations. There's property management companies out there playing monopoly and condominiums and doing illegal things to acquire those properties. Thank you for uplifting that for us. If you do have examples of illegal activity, do not be shy for saying that our way, and we could definitely look investigate those for you. So please feel free to share those with us so we can be proactive and also addressing that as well. A question about Senator Laura Book. So I am unsure. I know Senator Book is running for office. She's not currently in office, but I have no doubt she also cares about issues impacting reproductive rights and judicial waiver. But she's not currently in office right now. She termed out. I know she's running again. And then Vicky wrote, marketing statewide with locally what our legislators are voting for that are against their constituents' but interest is key to changing the tide. We must digital billboards are needed across the state besides mass press releases. We must expose the voting records. Vicky, don't disagree with you at all. It just costs money to do that, and not a lot of folks have resources. But I definitely agree with you that we host these events to raise awareness about different topics of importance and to highlight vote records. So I do appreciate your advocacy on that, and definitely agree with you on the need to let constituents know how their lawmakers are voting on issues. Okay, then one more question. Sorry. John asks, what are the campaign support laws? In particular, what and how are limits set? How are they managed and enforced? So great question, John. At the end of the day, election law first depends on, is it a federal election or a state election? So federal law sets federal regulations, state law sets state regulations. It is the legislature that ultimately sets election laws for state and local races. Local municipalities may also set their own criteria, but the state often preempts locals. And there are, of course, the supremacy clause. So everyone has to follow federal laws as it pertains to standards on polling access and so forth. But campaign finance, as you're referencing, is determined by the level of government the elections fall under. So Florida campaign finance laws are set by state law. So great question. And the fundraising limits, like for example, for state candidates, they can only accept up to $1,000 per individual or corporation before and after a primary. But then you have political committees, which are like PACs, that can accept unlimited contributions. So it's a very Wild West, and I would say even broken structure, much like the federal government as well. We need major campaign finance reform for sure. Okay. And then I think I already grabbed these questions on this last page. So I think we are good to go, right? Double check. Yes. Yes. Okay. We grabbed every question. So that's awesome. Okay, y'all. So just next steps real quick. Let me go ahead and see if I can stop sharing my screen here. Okay, cool. So 67 of y'all stuck around for the whole thing. Y'all are rock stars. I appreciate y'all for doing that. Thank you for sticking with us through our legislative review. I'm actually gonna hop on another Zoom call myself. But don't worry, I won't be talking on that next one. I will just be listening. But I want to say thank you for joining us on our 2025 legislative session review. As a reminder, this will be recorded so you can rewatch it later. Also, based on popular demand, we'll be hosting a legislative session review specifically focused on the state budget. So stay tuned for that because there seems to be great interest for it. So we will host a session review just on the state budget. And I want to give a special thank you to our staff for not just helping to host this event, but of course, gathering all the questions and helping us get to everyone's perspectives. I did see a question about homelessness. Unfortunately, there were no new updates on homelessness either. However, the state budget may help us allocate more dollars towards homelessness services. So stay tuned for that. And thank you, Dr. Clark. I see you in the chat. Thank you for being here. I appreciate you as well. We have a lot of great folks who joined us tonight. I'm sorry I didn't get to acknowledge everyone. Did never had a chance to really look at the participant list, but please know I appreciate all of y'all for tuning in tonight. And again, stay tuned for a budget session as well. So with that, I appreciate y'all. Be healthy, be well, and we'll definitely talk soon. Okay. Thank you, everyone. See you soon.